the world awoke on June 22, 2025, to a dramatic and dangerous escalation in the Middle East. Over the preceding night, the United States military directly joined an ongoing conflict, launching a coordinated series of devastating airstrikes against Iran's most sensitive nuclear facilities. This decisive American action, codenamed Midnight Hammer, marked a new chapter in the confrontation that had been simmering for over a week. The targets were the cornerstones of Iran's nuclear ambitions: the heavily fortified Fordow fuel enrichment plant, the sprawling Natanz enrichment facility, and the nuclear research center in Isfahan. This intervention was not a surprise move initiated in a vacuum. It came after Israel had already been engaged in its own aerial campaign against Iran since June 13th, creating a volatile backdrop for America's entry. The American operation was a display of formidable military technology and precision. Reports from the Pentagon confirmed the use of B-2 stealth bombers, which flew under the cover of darkness to deliver their payload. For the first time in combat, these bombers dropped the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, a specialized bunker buster bomb designed specifically to destroy deeply buried and hardened targets like the Fordow facility, which is built into a mountain. The aerial assault was supplemented by a barrage of over 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles, launched from United States submarines positioned in the region. The stated goal was simple and severe: to obliterate Iran's capacity to develop a nuclear weapon. A threat that both the United States and Israel had long vowed they would never allow to materialize. This American military action was the culmination of weeks of failed diplomatic efforts and rising tensions. 5 rounds of direct talks between the United States and Iran had recently collapsed, failing to produce any agreement that would curb Tehran's nuclear program in a way that satisfied Washington or its allies. Israel, having already initiated its own strikes, had reportedly been pressing the United States to join the campaign. The specific request was for America's unique bunker buster capabilities, which Israeli forces do not possess, to ensure the complete destruction of the Fordow site. The coordination was seamless, transforming a regional conflict into a direct confrontation between Washington and Tehran. The immediate aftermath was a mixture of bold declarations and ominous silence. While the United States and Israel celebrated the mission's success, the full extent of the damage remained a point of contention. Iranian officials moved quickly to downplay the impact, claiming the destruction was superficial and that critical nuclear materials had been relocated from Fordow well in advance of the attack. However, the use of such powerful and specialized munitions suggests a clear intent to inflict irreversible damage. The strikes on June 21st and 22nd have irrevocably altered the geopolitical landscape, pushing the region and the wider world into a period of acute uncertainty and raising the specter of a much larger war. In the hours following the strikes, the leaders of the United States and Israel were quick to address the world, framing their actions as a necessary step to ensure global security. From the White House, President Donald Trump announced the operation with a triumphant tone, declaring it a spectacular military success. He stated that the targeted Iranian nuclear sites were now completely and totally obliterated. President Trump emphasized that the strikes were a direct response to Iran's continued pursuit of nuclear capabilities and its aggressive posture in the region. He also issued a stark warning to Tehran against any form of retaliation, saying, "Remember, there are many targets left," while insisting that the United States was not seeking regime change, but simply demanding that Iran make peace. This sentiment was echoed with equal force from Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised President Trump's bold decision, labeling it a historic moment for the security of Israel and the world. He confirmed that the two nations had acted in full coordination, a testament to the strength of their alliance. For Netanyahu's government, the strikes represented the fulfillment of a long-standing strategic objective, neutralizing what Israel has consistently described as an existential threat. The support in Israel was widespread, crossing political divides. Opposition leader Yair Lapid also backed the operation, stating unequivocally that the world was now a safer place as a result of the decisive action taken against Iran's nuclear program. The core justification provided by both nations centered on preventing a nuclear-armed Iran. They argued that years of diplomacy and sanctions had failed to deter Tehran from advancing its program, leaving military action as the only viable option. According to American officials, the final trigger was intelligence suggesting that Iran was on the verge of a significant nuclear breakthrough. The failure of the recent diplomatic talks was presented as the last straw, proof that Iran was not negotiating in good faith. The operation, therefore, was cast not as an act of aggression, but as a preemptive defensive measure designed to avert a far greater catastrophe in the future. President Trump also made it clear that he had acted without seeking prior authorization from the United States Congress, a move that is certain to generate significant political debate within the United States. He stressed that there was no intention of committing American ground forces to the conflict, framing Midnight Hammer as a limited surgical operation. The message from both Washington and Jerusalem was unified and unambiguous. They had drawn a red line, and with these strikes, they had enforced it. Their shared narrative was one of reluctant but resolute action, undertaken to protect their national interests and prevent the proliferation of the world's most dangerous weapons. The reaction from Tehran was swift, defiant, and filled with fury. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi delivered a blistering condemnation of the American and Israeli attacks, accusing the United States of betraying diplomacy and crossing a very big red line. He warned that this aggression would have everlasting consequences for regional and global stability. In his statement, Araghchi asserted Iran's right to self-defense, declaring that Tehran reserves all options to protect its sovereignty and its people. In a clear act of retaliation, Iran launched a new barrage of approximately 40 missiles toward Israel shortly after the United States strikes, injuring at least 16 people in Tel Aviv and demonstrating its willingness to escalate the conflict further. Iran immediately moved to rally international support and condemn the strikes on the world stage. The Iranian government formally requested an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, labeling the United States operation a grave violation of international law and the UN Charter. This diplomatic counter-offensive aims to isolate the United States and Israel and paint them as the aggressors. Meanwhile, Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, while confirming there had been no radioactive contamination from the damaged sites, vowed that the country's nuclear work would continue. This defiant stance signals that despite the heavy blows to its infrastructure, Iran has no intention of abandoning its nuclear ambitions. The international community responded with a mixture of condemnation and calls for calm. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres expressed his grave alarm over the dangerous escalation and urged all parties to exercise maximum restraint. Key global powers like Russia and China issued strong condemnations, denouncing the United States strikes as a flagrant violation of international law and a threat to peace. In Europe, the response was more measured but deeply concerned. Leaders in the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, along with the European Union, did not condone the attack, but focused on pleading for a de-escalation and a swift return to diplomacy to prevent a full-blown regional war. The reaction from Iran's neighbors in the Gulf was one of profound anxiety. The Gulf Arab states, while wary of Iran's influence, expressed deep concern for regional stability, as they are geographically positioned on the front line of any wider conflict. The world now watches nervously, caught between the United States and Israel's justification of preemptive defense and Iran's cry of unlawful aggression. The immediate challenge for global diplomacy is to contain the crisis and prevent the cycle of attack and counterattack from spiraling into an uncontrollable conflagration that could engulf the entire Middle East and have severe repercussions across the globe. Beyond the strategic calculations and political declarations, this escalating conflict is exacting a grim human toll. According to official figures released by the Iranian government, the Israeli attacks that began on June 13th have already resulted in a significant number of casualties. They report that over 400 people in Iran have been killed, with at least 3,056 others wounded. However, some independent observers, such as a Washington-based human rights group, suggest the numbers could be far higher, estimating at least 865 fatalities and 3,396 injuries. These figures represent not just statistics, but shattered families and communities caught in the crossfire of a geopolitical struggle. Israel has not been immune to the violence. The retaliatory strikes from Iran, primarily involving ballistic missiles and drones, have also claimed lives and spread fear among the civilian population. Israeli officials have confirmed that at least 24 people have been killed within Israel since the conflict began. The latest barrage of missiles following the United States intervention added to the count of the injured, with at least 16 people wounded in Tel Aviv. The constant threat of sirens and incoming rockets has become a terrifying reality for Israeli citizens, underscoring the fact that in modern warfare, the lines between military targets and civilian areas can become tragically blurred. Amid the fears of a potential nuclear catastrophe, there was one piece of reassuring news. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the United Nations nuclear watchdog, announced that it had received no reports of increased off-site radiation levels following the attacks on Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. This was later confirmed by Iran's own atomic energy organization. The IAEA has called for an emergency meeting for June 23 to address the unprecedented situation of nuclear facilities coming under direct military attack. While the immediate danger of radioactive contamination appears to have been averted, the incident sets a deeply troubling precedent for the safety and security of nuclear sites worldwide. This crisis is far more than a distant conflict between three nations. It holds profound implications for the entire world. The direct military confrontation risks igniting a wider regional war, which could draw in other countries and destabilize the global economy by disrupting critical oil supplies from the Persian Gulf. It challenges the very foundation of international law and the principles of national sovereignty. The path forward is fraught with peril. The immediate future will depend on whether diplomacy can triumph over militarism and whether the international community can successfully pull the primary actors back from the brink of a catastrophic war that no one can truly win.